Shrapnel.
Wagwan everyone and welcome to Film Shrapnel, your number one spot for everything movies. My name's Tobias and this is my co-anchor Craig.
Co-wanker?
Co-wanker. My co-wanker Craig. It just sounds like we sit in a dark room together watching movies, communally doing some... No, well, if we're co-wankers, I would mind that. How are you, Craig? You sound cheerful today.
I'm in a very good mood, yeah.
Excellent.
So today we're doing Hellraiser and Hellbound.
1 and 2. Yeah.
And I've been waiting to talk about this for a long time. So I never watched it. You kind of convinced me because you said, oh, no, actually, it's a bit more complicated. Because I used to think it was just like torture porn because I didn't know anything about it. I've seen like images of Pinhead. I just think it's about some pain shit going on. I don't know, like Saw.
We do pleasure in the delights of pain.
Yeah, that is true. But it is pretty complex, like not complex necessarily, but like it's smarter than it looks. At least
there's
the first
going
one.
On. Yeah.
Yeah, so
there's a lot going on. I really like certainly the first one. It's one of my all-time favorite horror films. I think it's just special. It's just a special movie. It's really, really good.
It's really well written. Like I like how it feels very character driven, which you don't really get in many like horror films where it's very the characters are very bland and it's mostly situational. You know what I mean?
I do, yeah. No, I was going to say, don't you find it interesting that certainly the first one, it's a movie about it. I would say Julia is not only the bad guy, but I'd also say she's the main character. And, you know, obviously Kirsty, the daughter, she's the heroine of the film. But I would absolutely say that Julia, we get the most character development from her. We see her most of the time on screen. And I'd also say she's the most compelling character as well.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And it's not really for something that's about opening doors to hell. The first one is really most of the movie. The crux of the movie is like seduction and luring people into, you know, getting killed. You know, it's and less about, you know, demons and shit. But the demons and shit are there.
Yeah, and they only play a small role. And like, I you know what character I find the most, well, apart from Julia obviously is very good. But I also really like Frank as a bad guy.
Yeah, Frank's a great bad guy, yeah.
And he's so much more interesting than Pinhead, who becomes like the main focus point of much of the franchise. Because I think they made like, what, 10 films or something or more? I'm not sure how many they made.
Yeah, I think they're into like the 12th or 13th one, something like that.
And I think they're remaking the first now, or I'm not sure if it's going to be a TV series or a sequel or a remake of the original film. I had a look at it. I watched the trailer. Some people seem to like it. I think it looks a bit naff, to be honest. It just looks too stylized, which I don't think is the right way to go. That's just my opinion.
I mean, but I would say that the first Hellraiser is stylized in its own way, in that Clive Barker fashion. Should we just jump in? Should we jump into talking about these movies? Let's do it. So let's start with Hellraiser. Like, obviously. Off the bat, what did you think? Because you'd never seen this before.
So you convinced me that this is a good film. And
it's amazing,
right.
Yeah.
I really like watching this film. When I actually watched this about 3 times now. And the first time I watched it, I stopped it for a minute and turned to my wife and said, you know what, I really like this film. And then like about 30 minutes later, I stopped it again. It's like, you know what, yeah, I really like this film. It's really good. So I was really impressed. Like, as I said, like for me, I think with us, I think sometimes like what really gets me is if that it's not well written, or if it's very well
Yeah.
written, I love it. But you sometimes I think you're a bit more liberal on that. You don't mind it so much as long as
No,
like the
yeah.
action and the effects and stuff are good. So we have slight different
Well, no, but
sometimes.
sometimes, like if the writing is like a weak point, but like other aspects of the film sort of make up for it, then yeah, I'm sort of game for a bit of bad dialogue. Certainly, if the dialogue is bad on purpose, I'll give it a pass. So I do know what you mean. I'm definitely way more liberal about it than you. As I say though, because it doesn't always make a film just fall apart for me, I guess.
It just bugs me. I don't know. I can't accept it sometimes when it's like that. But not a problem in Hellraiser. There are a few points of odd dialogue, but most of the like is very like I said, character driven. You have should we explain the story now? Unless you've got something
Okay.
else to add about your initial thoughts.
I mean, no, well, I've watched this film, many times over the years. I think I first saw it when I was like a young teenager. Um, I've always loved this film. I think it's brilliant. And the more I watch it, the better it gets. After watching it again this time round, I think I'm going to end up rating it higher than I would have going into it.
Oh, that's nice. That's
I'll
interesting.
I'll say that much. Anyway, yeah, let's break down the plot. So, in a nutshell, we've got a family moving into like a decrepit house that's like uh the sort of grounds for this uncle of theirs who did some like experimenting with like the occult, and they accidentally bring him back to life, and the wife was having an affair with him way back in the day, and now she's going to help give him people to eat or some shit so he can come back to life.
He
And
needs
that's
the
the
blood.
plot. He needs the blood. He needs the blood. We'll get into how he first gets the blood when we get to it. A bit silly, but yeah. Firstly, music. The score by Christopher Young is just excellent. Really well set, beautifully sets the tone.
Yeah, I agree. I have more notes, by the way. Well, I have one note about the music in the second film, which is quite important. It's a bit different than this, but I think it's maybe even more influential. But yeah, I do agree. And
Interesting.
speaking about other things, like not just a plot, but like everything else going on, the special effects in this film, I was not expecting them to be that great. And they were
They're
pretty
amazing.
they're amazing, yeah. And
Yeah.
so this our uncle character who comes back to life, which we'll get to in a second, I really like the reanimation scene when
Mm.
they bring him back.
The
And
the reanimation scene and every sort of subsequent like stage of his rejuvenation as well.
yeah, and there's even bits where he's just like walking around, like he's got he after a few murders have happened and he's slowly coming back to life. Uh not life exactly, but like he's becoming more solid, if you will.
Yeah.
Um he's even like wearing suits and stuff and like but he's still flesh and he doesn't have
Mm.
skin and he's just getting blood and everything and
Like ju-
I really like that.
juicy. Yeah, I loved how like the fact that he's juicy, it does affect the surroundings, and you can see how it's affecting the surroundings. There's also bits of that in the second one as well, where they
Mm.
really they do it in a white room, so you can really see like on the floor and on the walls just how much like this person just walking around this room is like spreading so much blood and nastiness. Oh, it's really well. I agree. Really well done. All the special effects in this. Not all the special effects in the second one are great though, but we'll get
Y-
to that. Um, so let's talk about Clive Barker really briefly. The only thing I've got here is I remember seeing something. I think it's on the cover of the DVD, and it's a Stephen King quote, and it was something like, "We have a new master of horror, and his name is Clive Barker."
mm.
Now, I know you're always one to have a laptop at hand. Uh, Can we look up Clive Barker? I purposely not looked him up, so I don't want to go in prepared for this. I want to know what else he's done because I know the name and I'm sure I've seen him around, but I only really
Uh,
know Hellraiser for sure.
well, to be honest, I didn't really know who he was until we watched this.
He was like an
And
author. He was an author, I'm sure, and I'm sure he was like they were like, okay, you wrote the book, you should make the movie. I think.
well, from what I actually watched a YouTube thing last night summarizing the whole franchise.
Oh,
And yeah, I won't mention, I forgot who the guy is, sorry, but it's a very good video. I really liked it. It was like an hour long. And the guy mentions how apparently Hellraiser was always supposed to become a film. That was always the idea. Even that, like, first came the book, then okay, let's put it out into a film. Um, but yeah, you wanted to know about his other works.
hmm,
He
that's
did
interesting.
so one film called Underworld. He wrote the screenplay for a British one. It looks very 80s. It's from 1985.
Right.
Da, 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 da. Film. I'm looking just at his film work, by the way. Uh, hold on. The short story The Forbidden from Barker's Books of Blood provided the basis of the 1992 film Candyman and its sequels.
Ooh,
That's very interesting. I had no idea there was
yeah.
a connection there. I
No.
think I think there was another franchise that he was working on, but I can't see it right here. Maybe I'm confused. But I think he's had some influence here and there. I will mention, by the way, so Hellraiser was his directorial debut, which, by the
Yeah.
way, is fucking amazing
Yeah.
directorial debut. I do wonder though how much he was helped by the people around him because I noticed that I was like, who did the cinematography here? Because there's some really great cinematography here and there. And there was one guy who I think he was quite established by this point, who I think really helped him. And also
Mm.
the special effects. I'm not sure who was really behind that, but a first-time director really needs a lot of support to make that to that level, which is really impressive
Yeah.
level. So I think, although he's the director, I wouldn't say he's like the. Well, yeah, he wrote the film, he directed it, fine, but I do think that he got a lot of help making
Well,
this.
I mean, to be fair, film is a collaborative art form at the end of the day, and a director is only as good as the other people around them. You know, ultimately, if you don't have like a good team. This is why we see so many filmmakers just using the same people over and over again. Because once they find like people they click with, a team they can work with, they don't want to work with anyone else. So, but you know what? You're probably right. He probably did have a lot of help because you've got a lot of experience backing someone who has a sort of literary vision but has never done it for screen before. And let's not forget they've always historically had problems hiring authors to be writers or directors. It has historically gone badly. What's his name, F. Scott Fitzgerald, had problems when Hollywood approached him. He couldn't really figure it out, couldn't fathom the old concept of a screenplay.
Mm. You know what else is interesting is that Clive Barker didn't direct the second Hellraiser film,
No, it was
but
some dude called like Randall something.
yeah, and he only provided the story. He didn't write the script as well.
Yeah.
And I think for me, we'll get to Hellraiser 2 in a minute, but I really feel that there's a very big difference in how the characters are done
Yes.
and motivate. Like, I will say this as well. One thing I really like about Hellraiser is it doesn't go too in depth into this kind of broader world of this pain and suffering pleasure thing that the cenobites kind of live in, which I guess is supposed to be something
Mm,
like hell. Makes sense because it's called Hellraiser. They don't really they have like kind of surface level presence. We don't go too deep into the mythology, and I quite like that actually. I don't mind having it as a distance. The second
mm,
film, we go right in. We throw
There's a
right into that world.
much bigger
And
focus. Yeah.
yeah, so I was like, I don't really know how interested I am in this. But I will say, after watching the YouTube video I watched yesterday, summarizing the whole franchise, I can see that the second film is still fucking a lot better than the rest of this shit that came later.
Yeah,
So
I mean, I don't dislike the second film at all. I actually quite like it, and I'm probably going to give it a reasonably high rating, despite it being significantly worse than the first one. Well, let's talk about this film because we're like nearly 20 minutes in, and
yeah.
yeah, let's go. So the movie begins with like the shot of the puzzle box, and it's getting sold to Frank, and then we see him activating the puzzle box, which also it seems more complicated than finding like a fucking clitoris. It's ridiculous. How, how
Is that one of your notes there?
that is one of my notes. Yeah, I I I feel like how does that puzzle box work? You just sort of stroke it a bit. It's like
Well,
rubbing
yeah.
a lamp. It's genie logic. And then when he activates it, we get the chain meat room, and we see the cenobites, sorry, for the first time, and we see Pinhead for the first time. And again, we're not going to see them until the last sort of 20 minutes of the film.
Mm.
Uh, they're barely in it. So then Larry and Julia, they show up to the house to move in, and it's a total shithole. The kitchen's like manky, maggots are everywhere. Um,
And then, sorry, can I stop you there? And as well,
Go
like
on.
Larry's just like decided, yeah, we're gonna move here now. We're gonna live here. And like
Yeah.
Julia has like no say in like the fact that they're moving house. By the way, here we come to a slight problem that I need. That the only issue I really have with this film is like, where the fuck are we? Are we
Yeah.
in England or are we in the US? It's so confusing.
Well, because everyone's got an American accent except Julia. So, because Julia's definitely like an Englishy sounding accent. So I feel like it could be America. I imagine it's somewhere in America, but where in America, God only knows.
But that house looks like an English house. That's a
It
house somewhere in the
does.
suburbs of like London or something.
It
It's,
does look like an English house. It has
I
to be
mean,
said.
even like, notice the windows, how they had these kind of like patterns and stuff.
Well,
Like it just seems so English. And like,
maybe they probably shot it in England. You never know.
I think they did. I did
I think
read.
I'm pretty sure Clive Barker was English.
He is. He's from Liverpool. But
Hey,
yeah,
you're all right, Clive Barker, Scouser. All right, kid. I like him more now.
yeah. But there's some bits I even wrote them down. I collected them up because I was like, where the fuck are we? Like, uh, so at one point, Larry says to Julia, "You're back on your own turf." So she's back in England, right? But it's his family's house. His
Ah,
mother,
ah.
I think, like, so what is he? Maybe American, but like was born in the UK, or maybe he had British parents or something. Uh, and then there's one bit where Kirsty, Larry's daughter, is like, I kind of like leave it. Like they just got off a train. By the way, the train, there's a shot of a train. That's definitely a British train. And then uh, they're walking away from the train station or something, and she's with this guy, and I think he was supposed to be English, but they made him American, and like something about him being too polite, and Kirsty says or something, and then the guy's like, "Hey, we're not all frigid," or something like this. Like, what? Where are you supposed to be from? You're both American. Like, I can't hear any difference there. And yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of. I think it was shot mostly in the UK, but for some reason they had British actors, and I don't know. It's just the weirdest thing
Mm.
where it's supposed to be. But apart from that, that doesn't really bother me that much.
Well, fair enough. I mean, I was going to say the husband Larry. he really reminds me of like a shit Randy Quaid, and but even down to his accent. So yeah, I just assumed it was set in America, but it did have a very English vibe.
I'll also add, sorry, there's even one bit where we first meet Kirsty. She's
Hmm,
walking down a dock, and then like you
yeah,
see, there's a shot of the cranes above her, and that's definitely in East London. That's definitely like in the docks of London somewhere. Like you can't tell me that's in the US. It just looks so British.
yeah. I mean, to be fair, there's a load of like film studios in London or around London. I'm sure it wouldn't surprise me. Maybe it'd be cheaper to shoot here back then in the 80s than in the States.
Well, like, so I haven't really mentioned this before. So I grew up near Elstree Studios, kind of like the
Hmm.
town over. And at Elstree Studios is where they filmed Star Wars and they filmed Indiana
Yeah,
Jones.
yeah.
And I always wondered, why did they film it here? I mean, they have freaking studios right there in the US, like, and especially why would you go from
But
the studios?
Elstree Studios has like a big reputation as well because they did all the Bond films too.
Yeah. And so apparently I heard that like I guess in the early 60s or or even maybe even a bit before, the level of effects was actually supposed to be very good in the UK during that time. And so that's why a lot of
Mm,
American companies were coming over to the UK because of the special effects. That was the main draw,
mm.
which makes sense. I mean, when you think of like Star Wars, you need a lot of special effects. Indiana Jones also needs a fair amount as well. So maybe also, apart from Clive Barker being British, they wanted to film in the UK because of the level of special effects, which this film also relies on. I don't
Mm,
know. I'm just pulling at
possibly.
hairs here.
Where were we? I think it's made pretty abundantly clear from the get-go that Julia's in love with this, mysterious brother Frank, who is meant to be in the house somewhere.
So like Larry, the brother that she's married to, is a bit of a how can you describe him? He's not really a manly man.
Ra-
He's a bit of a goofball.
He's a simp, Randy Quaid.
Yeah, as you said. And
Yeah.
while Frank is more like more like manly. This is Frank. This is Frank's voice. He's
Yeah,
taking advantage of you. And like
it
he's
ha-
the
I mean, it has to be said when you compare them side by side, you can see why she cheated on him.
Yeah, and she's basically doing this because she wants some really hot sex, really. That's the
Mm,
whole plot of this film. She wants to
pretty
bring
much.
back basically maybe if she manages to get the whole thing, he'll have a penis and she'll get some action at the end because probably she's not getting much from Larry, to be honest.
Well, I mean, no, no, I think Larry wants to because there's a bit where later on in the film, uh, Frank tries to lure Larry upstairs by making like banging on the wall or something, and she seduces him to stop him from going upstairs. But when they go to bed, uh, Frank comes out to try and kill him, and then she's like, "Oh no, no, I can't bear it. I can't bear it. Don't do it. Don't do it." And obviously, Larry thinks she's talking to him, and he's like, "Oh, you know what? You're so hot and cold today. You know, one minute you're into me, next minute you're not." And yeah, I took that they were probably a healthily married couple until she met Frank.
Nah, I disagree because like even I think like they were just about to get married when she first meets Frank and she
Oh
has an
yeah, you're
affair with
right.
him. And I
Mm,
think that she's just always been not like, even for example, the fact that they're moving into this house and she has no say in it. Like, I think they mentioned Brooklyn. I think she'd rather be back in like
I'm,
New York or wherever they were. She doesn't care about this place. It's boring for her and she has no say in it. And that, like, Larry, I think is just not very, I don't know. I think she gets really irritated by him. There's even a bit where they have the dinner party and she's just like, doesn't want to be there, doesn't want to be around him. I
yeah.
don't know. I don't think, I think their marriage is not good. I think
Well,
he'd be
so
more than happy
I,
to get laid,
I,
But I think
well,
Julie just doesn't
yeah.
want to get laid with him.
So,
It's
yeah,
like,
you know
nah.
what? I will give you that, because in all fairness, like, you know, who moves your family into this random fucking dirty, dilapidated house? In all fairness. And then he talks his daughter into moving in, who's already got her own place. You know, so
Hmm.
she's settled down. He's talked her into coming back home. And it's like, yeah, he is a bit of a twat.
But in his defense, I like watching it again. I will say that the film really benefits from having him. It humanizes it a bit. I don't
Mm.
know. It needs his touch, his slightly goofballish.
Well,
Uh,
he's just very wholesome, isn't he? He's very wholesome, you know, and he's a good father,
yeah, he
you
still
know.
cares for his daughter and everything.
Yeah. But this is so they're moving shit into the house, and they're trying to get a mattress into the house, and you got these two guys helping Larry get it upstairs, and they're like making eyes at his wife, and then they make eyes at his daughter as well when she comes in. Um, and I just wanted to point out, because they what they do is they struggle to get the mattress up the stairs. Meanwhile, Julia's having flashbacks to when she first meets Frank, and they start fucking. By the way, I thought it was interesting that there's more male nudity in the sex scene than there is female nudity. I thought that was interesting.
I didn't even
Um,
notice that, to be honest.
I mean, it's not, you know, it's just a glimpse. It's just a glimpse. But the only thing you don't see Julia's breasts. You only see her bum. That's the whole sex scene. You don't see any of her front, shall we say? Um, but we do get a glimpse of Frank's nether regions, and I just thought it was interesting because obviously at this sort of time, the 80s, uh, exploitation was really like such a key factor of horror films that you know you need to put nudity in. It was almost a requirement, you know, to get these movies made. That you know, okay, but what's going to be the topless scene? You know, what how are you going to do it? You know, what's going to be special about your topless scene in this movie? So yeah, they don't do that. Uh, Instead, it's almost like a mockery of it, where they're like, no, no, you know what? You can see a bit of penis instead. If you really want some nudity, here you go. Um,
And
so
like,
it immediately feels like a horror film that's not quite the same as the other ones coming out at this sort of time. It immediately sets itself apart in just these little choices.
yeah, and also like I like as you said, like many films, they always have like a sex scene, a bit of nudity, some passion. We've talked about this before, how a lot of the
Yeah,
time it doesn't feel like it adds anything, and when it doesn't
more
add, an
yeah, more
yeah,
often than not, it sort of comes out of nowhere, and it's the story has to stop for the sex scene to happen, and then the
yeah,
story can carry on again once it's done.
and you're watching like for 5 minutes with your parents, and it's like awkward as fuck. But in
Mm.
this film, it adds to it. It's part of the plot,
Yeah,
and
I agree. Yeah.
I think that she's kind of taken a bit advantage of by Frank as well.
Oh, of
Uh,
course,
so
of
I think,
course.
yeah, I think that really adds to it, and it's yeah, explaining a lot of shit.
Mm. Sorry, I was gonna say as well that they cut the flashback to them having sex with them trying to squeeze the mattress past this nail, and it ends up scratching Larry's hand, and he needs to get stitches. And I couldn't decide because like I say, I thought it felt dated. I didn't really like that scene. Felt a bit strange, but at the same time, I also can make I I felt, despite me not liking it because it felt like it was trying to be funny, it made me think maybe that's to suggest that Frank had some involvement in him getting cut in order for him to come back.
I was wondering that as well, actually, because it seemed a bit too coincidental, didn't it? That
Mm.
she's thinking about him in the room where he died, where he will then be regenerated. Where as soon as uh, Larry comes in there and spills his blood on it,
Mm.
So that was
Yeah, it
interesting.
it was definitely done very like on purpose. And like I say, initially I was like, oh, this is a bit silly. But then after like reflection, I was like, actually, that might be quite clever.
Mm,
Because we will get to it obviously in Hellraiser 2, but we do find out in the sequel that he can send messages from hell. He can influence people in the real world.
yeah, it's interesting because that's not really explained how and why, but yeah.
No. So I think we can make that argument. So I did like it after my initial disliking. And then obviously the blood brings him back, and then we get Frank back to life. And I agree with your earlier assessment. It's amazing. I love the effects of the heart being reanimated, and then obviously like his first form where Julia discovers him, and he's like crawling all over the floor. Really fucking scary. I loved it.
Yeah, and his legs aren't even moving properly. I think they had
Mm,
a double in there that wasn't the same actor, and some kind of physical actor, I guess. And he's kind of funny how he closes the door and he's like,
yeah.
it's Frank," and then every time,
Don't look at me though.
"Don't look at me."
But look at me, but don't look at me. Yeah, no, I felt that like every now and again he'd invite her to look at him, and then go, "Don't look at me."
or
Um,
or it would be when he was sucking the life force out of someone.
yeah, he'd be like, "Give it to me," and then, but don't look at me. It's just yeah. Um, I've got a note here. They've got like a little dinner party happening downstairs while Julia's discovering Frank. And the daughter has a boyfriend round called Steve, um, and he does this cigarette flip into his mouth,
Yeah.
and I'd forgotten that, and this is the I used to do that when I'd first started smoking, and I think it was because of this film.
Well, that's
I
some.
I could smoke a cigarette like halfway down, and then I could like flip it back into my mouth. I burnt myself once and never did it again.
That was the first time, actually, right?
No, I wish. I wish. It was like my little party piece. Um. So yeah. So we know that he needs blood. He says like, "Oh, the blood got me this far, but don't look at me. But the blood got me this far, so I need more. Give me more, but don't look at me."
You'll do this for me, won't you?
Oh, yeah,
Something
and you
like
know
this.
what? And the thing is, no. Why, Julia? Really though, sweetie, why are you doing this for him? He's a
Because
fucking monster.
she's
No, what?
sexually starved. She needs a real man, and Larry's not that man.
Um. So Julia now has to go out and start hunting men at bars to bring back for Frank. And the first guy she brings back, like when you watch the film, you look at her eyes and it's like you clearly have no interest in sleeping with this man. And then this man looks at her and goes, you know, I feel like I've known you for years.
Yeah, I remember that line. I've
Oh,
got that
it's
written down.
so yeah, I love that. I love that because she is clearly not interested.
And
And then
then,
he switches at her as well because he sort of picks up that she's not into it. And then he snaps at her, sort of been like, "Oh, you're not gonna change your mind, are you?" And then immediately says sorry to be, "Oh, sorry, I was such a nutcase."
just for a second,
Hmm.
yeah, I remember that too. And yeah, did you notice also the first two guys that they kill are kind of like bold and balding? It's like, are they trying to say something about bolden men that they're struggling to get laid or something, that they literally
Well,
need someone to pretty much, yeah, come on, and then they
well,
get murdered.
I mean, but in all fairness, though, it's not like Julia isn't a very beautiful woman. She is. So perhaps, yeah, perhaps it's just more a case of, you know, fat, desperate men will be quicker to convince to come round and, you know, walk into an empty room without suspicion.
Mm.
If you were lured into that room, there's no way you would not like sense something's up. You know, you're like, this
Yeah.
isn't the bedroom. He's like, this isn't the bedroom. She's like, oh, I like to do it on the floor. And then she makes him strip, but she's not strip. And then you're like, nah, you know, your spider senses would be tingling at this point. You know, what else do you need to give to have it to be a dead giveaway? What, plastic on the floor? Like, just get out the fucking house.
Yeah. And there's even he tries to leave at one point, and there's another line I like a lot as well. It's like, just need to empty the old bladder, and like,
Yeah, yeah. It was like you're about to get laid. He's about to get laid. His trousers down to his ankles. Oh, yep. Just gotta go. Just gotta go to the little boy's room. And he's like so weird about it as well. What a turn off! If she
I,
really was into him, that would be enough to be like, actually, why aren't you? Why don't you see yourself out?
and then it's at that point that he realizes the door is locked, and then
Yeah,
she murders him with a hammer, doesn't she? And
absolutely bludgeons him.
yeah, and I think I read somewhere, I'm not sure if it's this murder or another murder, that I think they had to cut some violence from the film because it was too much for
Oh,
the so it could
really?
be, yeah, apparently it was too much having the idea of someone being
Well,
bludgeoned to death with a hammer. And then, yeah, so then she starts murdering people. We get in, Frank is slowly, well,
getting
she's not
strong.
really, it even becomes a point where kind of Frank really starts doing the killing, and he's doing some strange thing where sticking his back fingers into their, I don't know what you would call that bit behind the skull,
What,
that like sucking
cerebellum,
the life out of them. I have no idea.
cerebrum. This weird sort of effect where he can like shove his hand in the back of your head, and he's getting slowly stronger. And eventually, it's like, okay, all we need now is some skin. But don't look at me. Oh no, actually, after he rejuvenates like once or twice, then he's all like, "Look at me, I want to touch you," and
Hey,
like,
come here.
so you've gone from like, "Don't look at me" to "Come here, let me feel up your boobs." But it's like, hang on a minute, you still look like shit. Like, there's nothing that's really you still look really fucking terrifying. You can't really expect her to get. She probably thought she feeds you a person, you'd be back to normal. You're like, you know, you look like a biology textbook.
Yeah, and by the way, so we'll get into. Remember about the rejuvenation, because there's something about that in the second film we got to talk about. Uh, but yeah, did he actually say that about the skin, that he needs some skin?
I'm pretty sure he says it like for the last one, where
Uh
like
huh.
she's been quite defensive about him killing Larry, but then at that, you know, because obviously the cenobites are coming, so he's like, you know, all we need now is some skin, and Larry is coming home now. So
Ah,
pretty,
that's interesting.
I'm pretty sure they say something like that. Uh,
Because there is something different going on in the second one about that as well that we'll get onto. But I always thought that maybe he just wanted to steal his brother's identity, because his
I
brother
mean,
has money for a house, a good job, and everything,
I think yeah,
while
but
Frank is,
I think only temporarily though. I think the idea was to get all of his skin back eventually,
yeah,
because it's kind of like the Mummy rules, isn't it? With Brendan Fraser, it's like with each person he suck. Every time he sucks a person, he gets their powers. He gets their life force. So so this is the thing. Frank then has to. He reveals, doesn't he, that the Cenobites are coming to Julia, and Julia seems like she's kind of getting on board with not only the killing but also with Frank's obscure new look. And then we get like this random homeless, like we get this really weird scene with some random homeless guy is stalking Kirsty, and they go into like a pet shop, and he eats a handful of like locusts or something. And it just seems to be so separate from the plot until the very last shot of the film, where the homeless dude rocks up again, and we get the reveal that he's actually a demon.
Yeah, he wants the
box.
He wants the box, which was called what again? What was the box called? I swear there was a name for it.
I just called it the Rubik's Cube in my notes.
I did wonder, by the way, watching this, like how influential the Rubik's Cube was to the idea of this box. Because it really is basically a Rubik's Cube.
I'll tell you this, because in the second one, there's someone who's like obsessed about puzzles, and they're like doing this puzzle of a cube, but it's not a Rubik's Cube. And I'm like, why haven't they got a Rubik's Cube? Surely it's just such an obvious thing to have. Like, if someone was good at Rubik's Cubes, maybe they can solve the puzzle. Julia starts, she's bringing more men back. And I said this, that I think she starts enjoying the killing. This is when Julia stops Larry going upstairs because Frank's just like fucking about. He comes out of the cupboard. We already talked about this scene.
There was just something interesting, like, so he's also cutting up like a fucking rat while Larry's trying to get his jig on. And there was one line, I just saw it in my notes, no Larry or something like that. Where was it? Where is that line gone? And I was thinking that could be interpreted like two ways. Is she saying it to Larry to stop, which maybe she is, or she's saying it to Frank, like, not him. Like,
no, I think it's pretty obvious that she's saying it to Frank to leave Larry alone. But the thing is, as far as Larry's perspective of this dialogue is that she's telling him to stop trying to fuck her, and he doesn't straight away stop. She has to freak out for a large portion of time before he just sits up and goes, I just don't understand you.
Yeah. And then where are we now in terms of the plot? We're getting kind of close to Frank is.
We get I think this is where she brings the last person to Frank. And then like
Kirsty sees.
Yeah, she hears like a scream or something from outside. And then she goes up to investigate. Julia hides, but Frank pulls her into the room, Kirsty into the room. And then he gets all pervy with her.
He gets very rapey.
He gets very rapey, and it's like, that's your niece, you gross fuck. It's one thing that you are like the sort of macho asshole brother who goes after your brother's wife. But it's another thing to be like just an absolute creep. And you haven't got any skin. And then Frank, the box becomes the center of the plot from this point, because this is where Kirsty steals the box.
She throws it out the window.
Yeah, she throws it out the window, and then she jumps out and she grabs the box, and then she opens it, and she like has a little explore, only to discover like a Cronenberg scorpion creature. And then it chases her into the room or something, and then the cenobites show up, and Pinhead says, I've written this line down, we are explorers of the further regions of experience, which is a great line.
Yeah. And then
Some
she
call
basically,
us devils, some call us angels. We are just explorers of the further regions of experience.
yeah, this is kind of why I didn't like always the idea that it's hell, because it's
Mm.
kind of what they're trying to imply is something beyond that, really, aren't they?
Yeah,
With that,
yeah.
and then at this point we have Kirsty kind of convincing them, no, it was by accident. I didn't know what I was doing, and then she
And
says that Frank escaped, and that gets their
yeah,
attention.
she grasses him up. But they don't believe her at first, so they're like, we need to hear him admit it. And then this is when uh, Frank takes Larry's skin, and then then Kirsty runs back home to try and warn her dad, but it's actually Frank. And
Hmm.
then as her dad, he gets all pervy with her again, and he then accidentally, on purpose, kills Julia.
Yeah,
But it was obvious he was going to betray her at some point.
he didn't really need her anymore.
I mean,
You don't.
I feel like it could have been handy to have her around though, instead of just killing her off while you're in the middle of trying to kill Kirsty as well. Seemed a bit counterintuitive to get rid of the one person that's helping you out.
Yeah, and I'm also wondering how much he would have benefited from that now, because he's basically fully reformed. Like he's put on someone else's skin, which seems to
Yeah,
be quite fragile because there's a point where Kirsty scratches him across the face and his skin
right.
kind of comes off. So he's kind of
Yeah.
fragile in that sense, but he's like fully mobile and able to do stuff. So if he sucks the life out of Julia, what is he actually getting now? What does that do for him? Does he need to do that anymore?
I,
I
I,
don't know.
I mean, yeah, I think eventually he'll be able to get his own skin back, I assume. Um, but then, oh, what happened? So the Cenobites don't believe her. Oh, so something happens with the Cenobites. Hang on a minute. Because there's like, we want the man who did this. And she thinks that they're trying to kill her dad. But really, the body is her dad. And who she
Hmm.
thinks is her dad is Frank. So that's why he needs to admit it as well, because he looks like Frank. Sorry, he looks like Larry. It gets confusing. Identity, like concealments.
Yeah, and then I can't remember exactly what happens here, but somehow the Cenobites get hold of Frank in Larry's body, and we have that shot that's fairly quite well known, like where he has all those chains attached to his body, and he's like Jesus wept, and then he just
Jesus wept.
no, but it's like in Larry's voice. It's not that. It's not that strange voice, which I think is just a British guy doing a
Mm,
voice of a kind of tough guy American something.
mm.
And then yeah, he basically explodes, and then Larry is sorry, not Larry. Well, actually, you get there. Larry and Frank are both dead. Uh, and then the Cenobites, like I think it's like, okay, he's exploded now, he's gone. And then the Cenobite starts coming up the stairs with some knife thing, and the wall's like bleeding. It's like we're not finished with you yet,
Mm.
and then we have this. It's kind of funny how she defeats them. Actually, it's a bit. I don't know if it really made sense that she should be able to defeat them, but she manages to with Steve. By the way, this guy Steve is there as well,
Well, she figures out how to use the box tactically
which is very strange when you think about it, because I
somehow.
think it's a bit tricky to figure out anyway. And now suddenly you're
Yeah,
just killing people with it. Like, yeah. And then the house
it's
falls down.
funny. It's funny you bring up Steve though, because I've got a note here. Uh, I found it annoying that Steve showed up. I would have actually preferred it if Kirsty had just dealt with them on her own.
Yeah. You didn't really need him there. There was
No,
even one point. Uh, so there's this that weird thing you called it a Cronenberg kind of like what did you call it? Like scorpion
scorpion
mouth
thing.
thing.
Yeah.
And that comes at that it enters through the front door trying to get at them. And Kirsty's trying to grab the box from it. Like I'm not really sure what's going on there, but they're both trying to grab the box. I think at some point Steve grabs the box and she just like pushes him and grabs it because he doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. It's like fuck off. Like I
Mm.
know how to use this thing. Um I kind of like that actually. But yeah, d- I'm not sure what I felt about that part, the very end, the battle with the Cenobites. I thought it was a bit
And
not sure if it
and
was necessary.
this is the thing, yeah. I mean, I would have liked it that just the Cenobites sort of just fade into the walls again and be like, "Don't call us again, Kirsty, or next time we will show you the pleasures of pain." And then that could have been the end of the movie. But I felt, yeah, there was probably like pressure to have a climax against the Cenobites.
Mm,
Um, because they're, as much as we know their motivation is, we like to bring people into our sort of pleasure pain circle. Beyond that, there's really no motivation to, they're not vengeful. It's just the case of, you called us, we're coming to get you. That's it.
mm-hmm.
There's a good line in the second one, uh, where they convince a puzzle girl to do the puzzle, and what's the quote? Pinhead says something like, oh, I can't find it. I can't find it in my notes, but he says something like, "Hands don't call us, desire does."
Ah, that's interesting. Yeah.
That might be
Uh,
the only good line in the sequel.
yeah, the dialogue is not as well written. And there's
No.
also speaking of lines, when Frank says Jesus wept, what do you think
Mm.
that means? Do you think that implies that he's seen everything? Like he knows everything that ever happened or something like that? Like he's now experienced so much pain and seen all the worst and best of the world that he knows everything. What do you
Yes.
think that means?
That that's exactly how I read it. I read it as a sort of, at this point of death, where they're making him feel such a maximum amount of pain that it's just like, you know al- almost euphoric for him, uh which is also really like beautifully done in a really twisted way.
Hmm. Yeah, I think
I
we've mostly done this film now, by the way, because we got to
Yeah.
do the second one now.
I'll briefly go over like some notes I've gotten written that I've skipped over. Like, so much for this cat and mouse shit. When when Frank gets figured out that when he's pretending to be Larry, I thought that was a funny line.
And
Uh,
there was another line as well I got right here.
Go on.
When the Cenobites finally catch Frank, and he turns to Kirsty, says, "You set me up, bitch."
Yeah, yeah, you set me up, bitch. And then we've got, I wrote down that there's a bit where there's like a corpse of one of the victims and it pukes maggots on Kirsty's shoulder. And it's like one of the few jump scares in the movie. And it did make me jump. And I
Yeah,
laughed. I was annoyed that it made me jump, but it did. And then when the Cenobites, this is my last note, when the Cenobites come for Frank and he's like admitting to it all, you could say they caught him hook, line, and sinker.
fuck's sake, why did you do that to us?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I do really like that when they scratch the wall, it bleeds. There's another bit in the sequel that they do something similar, but I've always liked the idea of inanimate objects bleeding.
Yeah, I like that too. I got a note here. I think this is like kind of summarizes my thoughts. What I really like about this film is that the accomplice is human with human desires, and the bad guy
Mm,
is not a pure evil kind of personality, just hedonistic. The whole thing feels like you could take the horror elements away, and it's still fucked up. They're
yeah.
like low level criminals or supernatural beings. Like more. Sorry, I don't know what I've written here. But there's some kind of how they're like low level criminals in like a kind of supernatural setting. Like it's
Mm.
the beings that they're fucking around with, the Cenobites, are kind of like very powerful and interdimensional beyond their comprehension.
So when the
So like,
Cenobites show up, they're like, "We're in the wrong movie."
yeah, but I really like that. I really did like how they
Yeah,
did that.
I think it works.
Desire and hedonism as like part of
Mm.
the drives that leads them to murder.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's really cleverly done. I've really got nothing bad to say about this movie. I really love this film.
Yeah, I have so many more notes, but it'd be so too much to go through them all. I will point out there is a pet shop that has monkeys, which I found strange, but never
That
mind.
is strange.
There
Well,
is more to say.
before we wrap up with like the rating, should we just talk very briefly about this homeless dude being a demon at the end?
See, there is another part of the ending we haven't discussed yet. So apart from this homeless guy who becomes a demon and steals because Kirsty throws the box into a fire to destroy it, and he appears and takes it and disappears. So you assume maybe there'll be something coming out of that, like a sequel or something.
Hmm.
Which there is a sequel, but I don't know how it relates to this demon. There's nothing about him. By the way, for a homeless guy, he's got beautiful eyes. We'll just mention that.
Very
Uh,
handsome homeless man.
Handsome homeless man, yeah. And like, yeah, I don't know why that was there. And then, by the way, before we forget, after that, the film ends how it starts. We
Yes.
then we come to Frank starting again. He's buying the box. So like I was also thinking
No, no,
again.
no. It's not Frank again. It's the same salesman from the beginning, but it's a new guy buying the box.
Are you sure? I
Yes.
swear it was Frank.
No, it's not Frank. It's not Frank.
Ah, because I was going to say if that was Frank, that it's like Frank already knows everything that's going to happen to him, and he wants to relive all of this again, all of this shit with
That
Julia, re coming back to life again,
that would
and
have been
like,
interesting.
yeah, that's what I thought it was going for. But now you maybe ruined it for me saying it's someone else. I thought it was being
Sorry,
super
man.
clever.
Sorry, man. My bad. It's still being clever, just not as clever as you wanted it to be.
Yeah.
Should we give it a rating then?
Yes. I for me.
How many how many Rubik's cubes out of 23 Rubik's cubes?
Oh, I have a Rubik's cube now, and I'm trying to solve it, and it's a bitch. So I don't know. Like, does it imply complexity? I don't know. Well, there is a fair amount of complexity.
I'd
Out of
say so.
20, did you say?
23.
23. Why 23?
I don't know.
Okay, it's
Hang
a
on, how many?
non-number.
Hang on, how many sides does a Rubik's cube have? Sorry, how many squares does a Rubik's cube have? Because you've got 9 on each side, and you've got what, 6 sides?
Yeah.
So
So
what?
nine
9
times
times
six.
6 is what, 54? So all right,
Uh,
out of 54 Rubik's cube squares, how many Rubik's cube squares do you give it?
Oh, you're right. Actually, by the way, I had to double check that you were correct on number 54.
I mean, man can do math in his head, you know, Famalan. Don't need no
Yeah,
calculator up in here, bruv.
I got a B in my GCSEs for maths. Uh, what am I trying to say? Yes. So out of 54 Rubik's cubes, I'm gonna give it probably like fairly high. I'm gonna give this about between about 47. I'm gonna give it a 47.
47 out of 54 Rubik's cubes.
Yeah, I'm pretty pleased with this film. There's some odd stuff happening here and there. Like I say, there's quite a lot with some of the stuff we watch. Um, but I really like the story. I really like how it comes together. I like the effects. I'm confused what country we're in, but I don't really care that much for it to
Mm.
bother me. I'm yeah, I'm pretty pleased with this film. I'm very happy we watched it.
I'm actually kind of pleased with your rating as well. I think I will agree with you. Let's go 47. Would you say 47 or 48?
47, I think I said, yeah.
Yeah, I'll go for 47 too. I'll agree with that. On IMDb, I'll give it a 9.
A
Maybe even
9.
a 9.5.
I
No,
would be
just a 9, just a 9.
I bet you it's probably a bit lower than that. I bet it's about an 8.5 on IMDb.
Nah,
Should I
but
check?
I reckon it'd be like a 7.2 on IMDb. But I'd give it a 9 point. I'd give it a 9 out of 10 for our IMDb rating.
Yeah, maybe I'd put about a 9 as well. I really like. This is one of my favorite films that we've actually watched, by the way. I really
Yeah,
like this.
it's so good. It's so good.
And of course, when I type in Hellraiser, it's coming up with the version. Actually, sorry, it's from last year, 2022. Oh, I need to maybe
Oh,
have a look at that. Um, should I tell you what it's? Oh, that's sad. So out of 10, it's
7.
6.9, which I think
Oh,
is really unjust.
yeah, it's so good.
It's a really clever
Oh,
film.
yeah, I love it. Oh, that's a shame. That's a shame because this movie really deserves more than a 6.9. I'd give it a 9. No sweat.
I'll give it at least an 8, at the bare minimum, at least an 8.
Proper
It
good
has to
film.
be.
I will say though, the sequels that like we're going to talk about Hellraiser 2 now, but the general franchise it's is quite terrible. But this one is like art. It's a work of art. It's brilliant.
Yeah. I've watched, so when I was watching the other this guy who I need to find out who he was on YouTube, who summarized it beautifully. Uh by the way, he mentions that so after the second film, it was bought by Miramax, Harvey Weinstein's company, and they kind of just took a big shit on it, basically.
Hmm.
And there's this theory that they kept making movies just so they could keep the rights to it. So at one point they would eventually make something good with it, but they didn't have. They were just taking scripts from other films and just like adding a Pinhead into it
That makes
to just
sense.
yeah. So unfortunately, they made some really bad ones. I know roughly the plots to some of them. They just really just don't match the original
No.
film. Even the second one,
They
which
become a lot more pinhead focused as well.
yeah, they even dropped the box. It just seems like it becomes a slasher thing, and it just feels like that's not what this was about in the first place. And like, there's even an argument that the whole thing about Hellraiser was to kind of tap into like BDSM kind of stuff, which the first film doesn't really do, although it's kind of implied that there's some hint of it there.
Hmm.
And I at least from what I understood, that was always the intention to go in that direction, but it never got there, unfortunately. Which is maybe
Hmm.
I don't know, maybe some people. It's sad because I imagine some people expected that from the films and never got it, so it's like, it's a bit disappointing.
You see that
Um,
that would make sense to me. Like if you did a modern Hellraiser, you'd do like you do your opening scene in like a fetish club where everyone's like into Hellraiser-y shit.
It makes sense, right? Like
Yeah.
I really think that's the direction they should have gone in, but unfortunately not.
All right. Well,
Anyway, let's
should
move
we
on to
jump?
Hellbound.
So let's get into Hellraiser 2. Um, I would say a good 15 minutes of this film is footage from the previous film.
Well, I wouldn't say 15 minutes, but at least 5 or so minutes. Yeah, it's
Well,
just basically a refresher.
at the beginning we got a refresher, but then later on, Kirsty in the mental asylum, uh, she also then re-explains all the like loads of details, and we get more flashbacks to the first film.
Yeah,
Maybe
we do.
meet me in the middle. Let's say 10 minutes.
Okay, maybe about 10 at least. Yeah. Um,
And it makes sense because this film's about 10 minutes longer than the first one.
yeah, and it was also interesting. I just realized this now since we're talking about both films. So at the end of the first Hellraiser movie,
Mm.
it kind of ends, at least from Kirsty's part of the story, with her and Steve throwing the what's it called, the
The
Rubik's
puzzle
cube
box.
puzzle box. There we go. That makes more sense. But I swear it was another name. Never mind. She throws it into a fire. A demon comes, takes it away. So then,
Mm.
how I don't get how she ends up. She wakes up in this hospital. Like maybe it was supposed to be like an alternative ending or something. I don't know how they got there. It
Yeah,
feels like it
because
feels like
sorry,
go
go
on.
on. All right, so I was going to say because the doctor puts the puzzle box on the table and says the police will be here to talk to you. And we can only assume that's going to be in regards to the house burning down. But they make such a deal about the puzzle box. It's almost like they're accusing her of stealing it, maybe, or something like that. But I mean, it doesn't make sense only until you consider that one of the doctors actually is researching the puzzle box, so he could have pushed that. But if a demon flew off with it, why is the puzzle box there? Why was she found with the puzzle box?
Yeah.
Where's Steve?
My assumption is that this is from the point of when the house kind of blew up or whatever in the first film, and then like she's found there unconscious. Steve is, I don't know where the fuck Steve is because you don't see him in this film at all. And maybe they found her in the house with the box. The house is destroyed, full of dead bodies and shit, and that's where we're going off from. It's almost as if that final scene from the first film with the demon guy, demon homeless man, didn't happen. That was never a thing.
Retconned.
Yeah, basically, which is very strange. I didn't notice that till really we just started talking about it. But yeah, kind of odd.
I kind of like that this film wanted to be its own film and called itself Hellbound. I like that it didn't want to be Hellraiser 2, even though it does prefix it with Hellraiser 2. It wanted its own title. I like that.
Well, you know that the book series was originally called Hellbound, right? But then the producer, so the producer who helped Clive Barker make the first film said Hellraiser sounds better. Let's do Hellraiser. It's like, okay, so maybe this film's like, no, this time I really want it to be called Hellbound, not Hellraiser. And then, okay, this time you get it to call it Hellbound. So everyone got what they wanted in the end.
Okay, I'll give you that. I like that. I didn't know that. Clive Barker doesn't direct this one. We talked about this. We've got this other guy.
He only provided the story. He didn't even write the script.
Right. That makes sense because the dialogue on this is absolute dog shit. I didn't even write down any of the doctor puns at the end, but hopefully we'll remember a couple. So we get the origins of Pinhead in the opening of this. So this is where we start to focus more on Pinhead, even though it's still not a huge thing in this movie. It only sort of comes into play once at the end, which also I don't love, but we'll get into that. So we see Pinhead origins, and he's like a soldier who discovers the puzzle box. I actually thought that this sort of Pinhead origins was something that was established in like later sequels, but fair enough, it's in this one. And then we see all these characters returning, and like we meet the new Doctor, who will be like the sort of main antithesis throughout the film, as well as Julia.
Yeah, so we have Dr. Chenard, who like...
Yeah, I didn't know what his name was. Chenard.
Yeah, Chenard, yeah.
Right.
And he's clearly a psycho from the get-go. Like, I even wrote down, like, who talks like that while doing brain surgery? Like, he was talking, I can't remember what he was saying, but it was very strange, I felt, the way he was described. Maybe he was describing something about the brain, but like, when you're doing brain surgery, like, I don't know if you should be acting like that. It just seemed very strange. And then, what else was I going to say about the beginning? Yeah, about the dialogue. So we also have, so Kirsty's in the hospital, and she's freaking the fuck out. And there's a police guy trying to get info from her that she doesn't really want to give. She's going to sound like a crazy person. And she says at one point, "My father didn't believe in fairy tales, but some of them are true, even the bad ones." And like, it set the tone of the level of dialogue that to expect from this film.
Oh god, yeah, that's really bad.
Yeah, it feels really, really cheesy. Like someone has never written something when they write something like that. when they equate
Who,
stories
so
just to fairy tales and not broader level of
who
things.
who wrote the script for this? If Barker came up with the story, who wrote the script, and have they done anything else?
Let me have a look. 1 minute. 1 minute. 1 minute.
Could be interesting. Maybe he went on to write something like amazing.
Screenplay is by a guy called Peter Atkins, and he's not. I can't even find anything on him on there. I don't know who this guy is. Hold on, IMDb quickly, but I don't want to see the rating. I don't want to ruin it for me.
Try and scroll fast.
So Peter Atkins, who wrote the screenplay for Hellraiser 2, the major things he also did Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth, and he did Hellraiser Bloodline. So like he kind of, I think, yeah, he's mostly involved in Hellraiser stuff.
Okay, interesting.
And the rest of the stuff I don't see anything with a rating higher than Perversions of Science, a TV series. That's the highest rated thing. It's like 6.3. So he's not particularly well known.
Okay, interesting. I mean, I suppose he uses up all of his good dialogue in this film because they do get progressively worse and worse.
Yeah. Like you said earlier, there are many Doctor puns that come later.
Should we? I mean, a couple that I remember was the Doctor's in.
Yeah, I remember that one as well.
He's become like a cenobite himself, and he's like, but I feel like the whole point, because we get this whole sense that cenobites were human, but they've forgotten they were human because they've been so engrossed into this sort of eternity of pain and pleasure. And yet, this Doctor character remembers enough of his life to be thrown around Doctor puns. Although I do love the bit when he does his final transformation and he comes out and he goes, "To think I hesitated." And I love that line. That was a good line.
Yeah. So let's get through the plot then. Let's explain what happens.
Right.
So basically...
I'll go on. Then you go for... I did the first one. You do this one.
All right. So in the second film, we have Kirsty in the hospital. People are trying to figure out what the fuck happened in that house. There's even some police officers who fuck around with the evidence a bit in the old house. And basically, we find out that Dr. Chenard, who's a bit of a creepy, bossy, how would you describe him? Psychotherapist, but he's also a surgeon. Let's just put it this way. He works with people who have mental shit going on, basically.
Yeah. He lobotomizes people, basically.
Yeah. And you can see quite clearly that he doesn't really respect people with mental illness. Like there's a whole bit where Kirsty is like straight up saying what happened, and you can just see that the way that he looks at her, that he just doesn't respect. It's just a stupid, crazy person. She's less of a person, almost, really, is how he kind of looks at her. And there's this whole bit where he's going through the hospital, and the way he just looks at his patients, the craziest people that he has, and they're just like test subjects to him. Also, I did get kind of vibes from Wheels on Meals a little bit when I see...
What?
Yeah, I remember in Wheels on Meals, there's a whole thing about the mental hospital, and it's really...
Yeah.
It's just played for laughs. But in this film, it's just played to make you feel uncomfortable. And I just think... I don't, you know what? Like, just leave mental hospitals alone. Let's leave people with mental illness stuff alone. Let's not stigmatize them more with this kind of shit. I think it's just so stupid. Though I do think it's done better here than Wheels on Meals, which is really, really bad, really offensive.
But in all fairness, though, it does fall into the plot somewhat, having, without being offensive, but like disposable people that people aren't going to miss.
More,
That's why that's a big plot point, that because obviously in the first film we spend a long period of time showing the progression for Frank and Julia, slowly feeding him body after body, but in this film, because the Doctor has access to all these people, when he brings Julia back, it can be done in one quick scene, and we just see how many people she's been sucking on.
yeah. So that's
They're
another
sucked
thing.
dry. Well, sucked dry.
Yeah, sucked dry. Yeah.
So, well, so this is the thing. In this point in the story, we find out, because obviously in the first one, Frank died in that room, and then the blood brought him back. And when Kirsty explains this to the Doctor, he obtains the bed, or the mattress rather, that Julia died on, and then he gets like this guy that imagines maggots all over his body and gives him a razor.
Oh,
And this scene is fucking brutal. He literally is peeling his own skin off.
it's
It is,
really fucked up.
yeah. And then obviously the blood brings Julia back to life. And these just two arms and legs just burst through the mattress and grab this guy who's just cutting himself up.
And he's just trying to crawl away from in his
Yeah.
own blood, and she's just coming after him on the floor, and it just sucks the life out of him. Yeah, I like that a lot. I
Yeah.
will say, actually, there are parts of the beginning of this movie that I like a lot more than the rest of it.
Yeah.
Like stuff like this. It was a bit.
This sequence is great.
Yeah, it was very coincidental that Chenard just happened to be a guy who was obsessed with these boxes. Like he had like several of
Yeah.
them in his house. And there's also another doctor guy. I guess he was kind of
Yeah.
replacing like the Steve from the previous film. And I love it when he breaks into Chenard's house. Like weird,
Yeah.
weird.
I've literally got that written down, and he's got weird, Jesus Christ. And that's his whole like response to all the strange things in the house. But then he hides behind like a curtain or something and like observes Julia coming back. So now he believes Kirsty as well. So at least there's some, but like, don't you think you'd have like intervened the moment the Doctor gave the guy a razor blade? Don't you think like a responsible doctor with their Hippocratic oath would have jumped out of the curtain, been like, "Ha ha! I've been here the whole time. You're in for it now, you."
Yeah, I get you there. I didn't even think about that. Mind you, though, probably if he did do that, he'd get done for breaking and entering, and then probably Chenard would get off without anything happening to him. Because
Hippocratic oath, bro.
I know. So
That
yeah,
that that that's like important. That shit. You need that Hippocratic oath.
otherwise you shouldn't be a doctor.
You better tattoo that shit to your body. Take it
Yeah.
seriously.
And by the way, speaking of random bits of dialogue again, there is one bit where it was unnecessary. It was weirdly added. There's a line that Chenard says when he's in his office, or he's on the phone. Like, let me make that clear: the house, not the hospital. Like, and he's talking about the mattress. It's like,
Mm.
why do we even have that? Like, you didn't. Like, I
Well,
don't know. It's
but
just
because that's why the reason we have that is because replacement Steve, Doctor Steve, overhears it, and that's what makes him suspicious to
I
break into his
know,
house.
but you could have done it a bit less bump. Like, what's the word I'm looking for?
Well,
Less.
clunky. It's
Yeah,
clunky dialogue for sure, and it's clunkily directed. That scene, I do agree.
yeah.
I wrote down a line. So obviously he brings Julia back to life, and like he's all into it. It seems like these like flesh monsters seem to have some sort of like supernatural allure. Um,
By the way, speaking about having no skin, doesn't that make them like really like not immune to like bacteria and shit? Wouldn't they just die? Because
Well, but
like,
they're not quite human, are they? They're sort of undead.
yeah, but still, that's the main point of skin, isn't it? To like protect you from
That
potential
is the point.
flesh.
That is the point of skin. Yes.
So like, yeah, I was wondering.
Oh, here's another thing, because obviously it's not all flesh as well. That it's like a lot of it's bone with exposed stuff, right? And
Mm,
there's a bit where so that like he sensually bandages her so they can like kiss and like fuck basically, and he touches her up like up her ass and stuff and her boobs, and I was thinking, but surely she doesn't have anything
to feel with.
to grab hold of. Yeah, I
It,
didn't really, I wasn't really clocking on to that. I was like, no, I don't buy that at all.
it's just like fucking meat, isn't it?
It, but some of it would just be bone.
Yeah,
Like you're
but
grabbing up bone. What is
it,
going? That's weird.
it's just like being a weirdo at the supermarket and start squeezing the meat in the meat section, and then you get arrested or some shit. Like it's there's that kind of level of creepiness. I don't
I
know. Like
I,
I
I got to ask. If you like, let's say you love someone very much. So your wife, for example. So if your wife had no skin, how would you handle that? Do you
I
think you'd
don't
be?
know.
Do you think you'd be able to like feel her up and stuff and kiss her and stuff like they do in this film? Because I'd be very much like, I'm sorry, sweetie, but I I can't even look at you.
You're gonna get me into trouble. Uh,
uh,
what do you mean? If I didn't have skin, you wouldn't? What's Yeah, and even again, it makes you more. It would be more sense. It'd be easier to damage yourself on like basic shit. Like people underestimate how your skin is just like protecting you. Like if you bump into the corner of a desk or something, you could fucking cut open your fucking muscle or some shit. But your skin
yeah,
stops you. Like you're so fragile like that.
absolutely. But this is what I was saying earlier, that like around this flat, we do see her like bloody meatiness getting scattered all over the apartment because it's like white walls, white flooring. So it really
Mm,
accentuates how much of a mess she is leaving around. And like why would you give her a white suit though?
I know it's so
You're an
silly.
idiot. That is like the dumbest that you give her a black suit.
Yeah, hide the
Why?
blood stains a little bit. Come
Yeah.
on.
Why on earth did you think it was a good idea to like, oh, I'm cold, I need some clothes. Okay, I have a white suit.
And let me dress
That's
you in my white living room in the white
I,
suit.
just so dumb. So dumb. Anyway, that's why I think there must be some sort of supernatural allure. Because a real sane human being just couldn't handle that.
Yeah, and I think the supernatural side of it, we kind of talked a bit about it before, like in the previous film, like how you can suck the life. They're using their fingers or whatever at the back of their heads and sucking the life out of them and like becoming more human. Um, but yeah, like to do that, wherever the fuck that is
Mm.
supernatural. But I'm not sure apart from that what other gains they get from it. I'm not sure. Do you think they're stronger than a regular person or not?
I mean, I assume so. They can like shove their hand into the back of your skull.
Yeah, yeah.
And
By
we
the
do,
way,
and later on, Julia rips out Frank's heart.
yeah, yeah, I forgot about that. But listen, yeah, have you watched the other Hellraiser movies?
Well, I was going to bring this up at the end. I've seen the third one for sure, and I remember
Mm.
bits of it, and I've seen one or two of the other ones that I don't remember because they're terrible.
So apart from Pinhead being the main centerpiece, do they ever have this whole? I don't know how you call these people, these kind of zombie uh, flesh suckers. Like, do they have these in the other films, or is it just these two? You have these people
I think
coming back from life.
I really feel like it's just these two because, like, as I say, the only one I really remember anything about is the third one. So uh, at the end of this film, there's like a big scare at the end where you think everyone's been defeated, but then this big giant sort of monolith box comes out of the bed, and it's got like the faces of everyone who've been like involved in the story and stuck in hell thus far. And Pinhead's face is in the center of it. And the movie just ends. Well, the third movie, that like structure is the center point of the third movie. And Pinhead is this like, he can speak to you from inside this thing. So he's telling you like he'll help you like grant wishes or some bollocks if they can get him out. I forget now exactly the details. But the third one was not, I remember not liking it at all. And uh it was just too far removed from the first two. And again, the second one, I remember saying to you, maybe we should do a double feature on Hellraiser, because I think Hellraiser 2 is one of the few sequels that are actually pretty decent in horror movies. Often they sort of fall that off in quality quite quickly. But I think I will stand by that, but it's definitely nowhere near as good as the first one. But I do think this is a very acceptable sequel, more than acceptable. I think this is a good sequel. It's not great. The first movie's great. This one's like good fun. It's good fun, and it's got some really good ideas.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. The reason I asked about the meat people, if you want to call it, I don't know, what should we call these guys, like Frank and Julia when they come back
Let's
to life?
let's call them meat people,
Meat people then. Uh
or the skinless.
the skinless, yeah. The skinless is better. The skinless characters, I find them so much more interesting than
Yeah.
the cenobites, to be honest. That's just
Mm.
me, maybe, because I think there's probably people that really like going into the mythology of the cenobites and how they work and stuff, and that's cool. That's all well and good, but for me, I really just like watching the skinless go
Oh,
about and do their skinless shit.
yeah. No, I'll tell you that in the third one, I don't think there's any skinless people. I remember there's a Cenobite that looks like he's got like CDs in him. It's a bit weird. I think that the Cenobites are way more center focused, and they're doing a lot more like killing people.
Yeah,
But like I seem to remember them like ambushing someone on a motorbike or something.
it
So
sounds so
it's,
stupid.
yeah, it's dumb. They get really dumb really fast.
That's really sad, isn't it?
Yeah.
Aye.
Look, where are we in the story?
So we've talked about Julia being patched up, and
Oh yeah, so
they're
Julia's
definitely
back.
fucking.
They're definitely fucking, and Kirsty insists on with the because the doctor busts her out because he's gotten confirmation, and then she's like, "Well, let's go to the house," and he's like, "Don't go there," and she's like, "No, we're going there." So they go there, and then while they're looking around, they split up like idiots who shouldn't split up, but fine. They split up. He goes into like the sort of meat room with all the people on the hooks. Uh, but like Julia's there, and she sucks it off and gets his life force. And then Kirsty discovers that Julia's back. And I've written this line. She goes, I think she hits her, and then she goes, "Take your best shot. So what?"
Yeah. Some more mind blowing dialogue right there.
Yeah, amazing, Oscar-worthy dialogue. Um, and then this is when they get Puzzle Girl involved to open the puzzle box, to open the door to the Cenobites. And then Pinhead says that line that I said earlier, where he's like, "It's not hands that calls us, it is desire." And then Kirsty, when she discovers that the door's been opened to the Cenobite land, uh, she decides, "Oh, I'm going to go look for my dad." Oh yeah, because we haven't mentioned she got a vision of her dad calling out for help, saying, "I'm trapped in hell."
Yeah.
So she's been obsessed on this idea that because her dad got killed by like supernatural causes, he's been trapped in this hellscape of a world where all the Cenobite people are.
Cenobite.
But as it turns out, we'll find out later that it's actually Frank that's putting these thoughts in her head, and that's why, you know, the course of events for Kirsty was set into play. He wanted her to come down. We'll find out later, but it's because of the kind of hell he's living in. But we'll get back to that.
Yeah. And I was
And
going to
then
say something there. Oh,
go on.
the reason. So you notice there's no Larry in this movie.
Yeah.
I did read actually that he didn't like the script, the actor. So it was originally he was supposed to come back, but they just ended up cutting that because he didn't like the film.
I mean, in all fairness, like it's not like he was as good as Randy Quaid.
No,
So I don't. I feel like if I was him, it would be like, you know what, this is probably the only movie I'll ever be in again because I'm not very good. Shall we look up this actor who played Larry and
well,
find out how prolific
let's
he's been?
let's find Larry.
But yeah, Puzzle Girl gets lost in that hell carnival at that point, and they have some like really cool shit going on. And there's a bit that I wrote down. They got the fetus that's sewing its own mouth shut.
Yeah, but you know what? To be honest, I'll tell you this, and maybe people will think I'm a dickhead, but I really just lost interest around this point of the film. It just felt
Oh,
like,
really?
yeah, like as soon as they enter hell, I just really was like, meh. I really my
Well,
interest nosedived.
well, I mean, don't get me wrong. We do see an awful lot more of like the hell world, um, but this is where we get some more like inanimate objects bleeding. By the way, that I mentioned earlier, I do like that shit. Um, but like, yeah, we're getting more Cenobite shit. Like we learn. Well, we've already learned about Pinhead at the beginning, but this is about the time it comes back around as well. But
Yeah,
also, we're learning that there are other sort of like different kinds of entities in this hellscape. We've got this god called Leviathan. So like Julia takes the doctor, whatever his name is,
Chenard.
um Chennard, and like she introduces him to this big fucking thing in the sky. And she's like, this is my god Leviathan, and he allowed me to come back so I can bring him souls. And then that's when the doctor is like put into like the transformation box. So because I had a note down and I've realized as you know what afterwards, but like the note I got down is, why aren't the Cenobites and the Doctor Cenobite working together? Why do they end up having a conflict? Because surely they're the same, but clearly not. There seems to be some kind of either hierarchy, or they're just different factions of demons in this hellscape. I don't know. The politics, or the just the general economical socio-economical system that they have, it's not clear.
Yeah, like I also found it strange how like because my assumption was that Levathian or whatever how you pronounce it is also the leader of the Cenobites. So surely
That's
the
what I thought.
Cenobites and Julia then they should be on the same side, the same team as well. But
Right, but it's not that way. It seems
or
it
maybe
seems that they're different, like totally different.
it's like sectors of a religion that are fighting against each other, or maybe
They're like
Levathian
Protestant
is
and Catholics.
exactly, yeah, or like maybe Levathian enjoys watching them fight or something. I don't know.
Hmm.
It's strange.
I did like that when the Cenobites corner Kirsty when she first arrives, they let her go, not because uh they are like being nice to her. They're like, hey, look, you know, you're not going to find your dad here, so we've got an eternity to fuck about with you. So you know what? You go have a look around because you can't escape. But then Kirsty discovers like a sexy room where the bed sheets are like haunted by sexy ghosts.
Do you
But
think that
this,
they're?
well, because this is revealed to be Frank's personal hell. Women that are begging to be fucked, but every time he takes the blanket off, they disappear. So always begging for him, always teasing him, but he's never able to do anything about it. But I think I've got a feeling you were going to say this, but I've got a feeling these are women that he's hurt in real life before his uh, Cenobite time.
That's an interesting way of looking at it. I was wondering, do you think that they're because the whole thing is about pleasure and pain. Do you
Mm.
think that they're having a pleasurable experience, or do you think that they're not having a pleasurable experience? I wasn't sure, like, because you could look at them the way they're moving under the
Well,
covers.
but
Are they? Is it pleasure or something else? I don't know.
I feel like I feel like both of these movies make such an active effort to say that to these people, to these entities, to everyone in this plane, pleasure and pain are interchangeable, cannot be distinguished anymore. So I don't think it really matters.
Uh, Fair enough. Well, it
I
would
think
feel.
I feel like it's probably done in such a way that you are watching it thinking, are they in pain or are they in pleasure? Yeah, I'd say it's both because they're doing it at one point. They're all bloody as well, as if they are being attacked.
Yeah,
So yeah, I think you're right.
a bit of a mix.
Mm. So then this is when we find out that Frank was baiting Kirsty with these visions, and then Kirsty tortures the place, but she does kiss him because he's getting all pervy because he's only lured her down there so he can have someone to like shag. Basically, he says this that like my hell is that I can't have sex with any of these women, so
Yeah,
that's why I needed you to come.
I
So
I
go
had
on.
one line. Where did I have it? It's where was it? Oh, damn it! The Uncle Frank is back, and so is incest. Like,
And then when she tortures the place, Frank has his face melted off, so we get like the effects from the old film again. In case you missed those, um, and then like Julia rocks up and pulls his heart out, and that's the end of the Frank cameo.
yeah, and I think we don't get any more Frank and Julia in the other films, do we? By the way,
Not sure. I'd have to double check.
yeah, yeah, and that was yeah. So then, yeah, what's her name? Kirsty's pretty much like needs to escape from hell. We got our new Cenobite on
And Puzzle Girl.
and Puzzle Girl because she got tricked into there. By the way, I looked into her. Her name is Imogen Borman. She's a British actress.
She looks
Uh,
familiar.
I thought so as well. I swear I know this girl from somewhere. But I think she's in like a lot of soap operas back in the UK
Oh,
after this.
maybe.
And apparently, I was looking at her private life on Wikipedia, and she had a lot of problems with alcohol, like driving under the influence
Hmm.
of kids in the back and shit. So, yeah,
Okay. Not ideal.
not ideal. Scarier than the film. Um, do you want to talk about? Because I'm sure you have a lot to say on this. The Chenard's special effects at this point. Our Chenard
So
Cenobite.
so yeah, Chenard. What should we? So we've got the skinless. We've got cenobites. What are we going to call this doctor?
I don't know. He got some special treatment. He got some shit on his head and some
Yeah,
special
he
powers.
he's like plugged into the matrix. So he's been tortured to this point of like Cenobite level, maybe Super Saiyan Cenobite. Maybe we call him Super Saiyan Cenobite. Bit of a mouthful. Um, and like then when he emerges from the box, this like big, weird, fleshy, sucky thing plugs into the back of his head like the Matrix, and then he can now fly as long as he's attached to this thing. And he's like flying around. This thing must be really long because he covers ground with this shit as well. And then we cut to Julia and the Kirsty and the puzzle girl, and they're getting sucked into a vortex. I forget where the vortex came from, but they're getting sucked into a vortex.
Oh
And then
yeah, what was up with that?
I forget what was going on with that, but Julia's holding the puzzle box, and then puzzle girl tries to help her for some fucking reason, and then her skin is left in puzzle girl's hand, and the rest of her insides get sucked out into the vortex, leaving her skin and the puzzle box, which will come back into play later in the plot for some fucking reason. Then the Doctor does something, I forget now. The Super Saiyan's Cenobite. This is when we get like the showdown. So the Cenobites just rock up and it's like, Kirsty, enough foreplay. It's time for the pleasures. And but then but she like reminds Pinhead of who he is and reminds all of them that they were once human. Hate this scene. And then the Super Saiyan Cenobite shows up, and then they have like a showdown, and this showdown is so anticlimactic. It's so disappointing. So like Pinhead transforms back into his human version, and he looks at the girls and is like, "Get out of here!" Even though he was gonna fucking kill them and like, well, not kill them, but torture them into pleasure for the rest of eternity. But now he's like, new sense of heart. Oh, actually, you can go because you reminded me I'm human. And then it looks like he's going to have a really cool, badass showdown. And all that happens is Super Saiyan Doc, a tentacle comes out of him. I assume it's one of his fingers. And like a scalpel comes out, he just slits his throat.
Yeah,
and
you'd
that was
expect
it.
more. You'd expect something with chains or some shit, something more painful. But mind you, isn't pleasure also pain? Aren't the lines a
Well,
bit blurred?
yes, the lines are blurred. It's just that I wanted something more climactic.
You
Like
expected something more from that.
you've established the power level of these god level beings, and then you get a Super Saiyan Cenobite. Like, so we're meant to assume he's way more powerful, and so you would expect them a far more climactic climax, but it's just like one quick slit, and it's seemingly not even enough of a distraction to get the girls out anyway.
Yeah.
It's so quick, especially when you consider it's Pinhead, the center point of this franchise. You would have liked to have seen him be a bit more badass. Um, and
Yeah.
then what happens? Because we got this other thing they go to the Leviathan. They go to that really, like, I quite like the landscape of that area where the Leviathan is, and they go there, and then the Doctor attacks them. Sorry, the Super Saiyan Cenobite attacks them, and then Julia shows up out of nowhere, distracts him by kissing him, so Puzzle Girl can quickly do the puzzle.
And she does the puzzle a bit differently, if I remember correctly. It makes it more like the shape of the Leviathan, if I'm
Yeah.
correct, right? Like it
Well, no,
becomes like a crystal kind of shape.
it became that earlier. She's got to get it back into the cube now.
Ah, see, this is really like I feel bad because like I said, I watched this twice, but I really struggle to remember like this bit. This whole part of the film just really didn't appeal to me very much,
No,
to be
it's a
honest.
bit, it's mad, but then not as mad as you need it to be.
Yeah, to keep you drawn to it, it's
Yeah, like that should have been Pinhead versus Mega Doc, like big climax, tiny climax, And then, well, to be fair, this bit, she kisses him. Julia kisses him. Thingy does the puzzle, and then the Leviathan freaks out, and the thing that's on the Doctor's head rips off the top of his head. Now that was,
Hmm.
I like that. That was fun, cool effect. And then it turns out that Julia isn't Julia; it's Kirsty that's put on Julia's skin that was left
Yeah.
behind.
I thought that was a bit stupid. That
Of
was a
course,
bit like fuck's
it was dumb
sake.
as fuck. Dumb as fuck. And then you think the movie's over, but then this other sort of giant, almost a grandfather clock like structure bursts out of the mattress. And
Yeah.
I think the two removal men who've come to pick that up are the same two from the
They
first
are.
one.
I have that
Yeah,
same note. They're the same guys. Or at least one of them is
yeah.
the same.
The guy with the eyebrows for sure. The
Yeah.
same guy. And that's the end of the movie.
Yeah. I mean, I found the second one, yeah, like I said, a bit tiring. I really don't remember. Like
Yeah.
I struggle to remember bits of it, and it's bad. I feel bad that I struggle with it.
The
Uh,
thing is, I think this one is more. It's more the effects really that they go harder on. They go harder on the sort of gore element, and I think they do a lot of stuff really well. Like there's some, like I say, some great ideas. I like the idea of seeing a cenobite, seeing the creation of a cenobite. I quite like the way it was done minimally. There are problems with it, but I did like the concept. I like the idea of like having like different kinds of cenobites, gods within this hellscape. I liked a lot of the ideas of the world building. I just prefer if they didn't do it. I think if only, yeah.
I like that. I like the ideas of it, but just don't. Yeah, don't do that, please.
Well, I think we've both made the point already that like when you're fleshing out this world, it better be damn good. Otherwise, why ruin the structure of the first one? The first one was so well done. Why don't we just keep having more flesh people, the skinless, instead of like because this is where we go really deep into the Cenobite stuff. And yeah, I don't really, as much as I like some of the ideas, I'd have rather it be another minimal idea. Maybe Kersey could have stayed trapped in the mental asylum for the majority of the movie. Maybe Julia is now trying to get to Kirsty. You just do a sort of smaller plot that you only go super big. When the Cenobites show up, and they only come in sort of fleetingly you know that I would
Mm,
have much preferred.
I
But I
agree.
but I do like some of the ideas, and I do like a lot of the effect. I love the bursting out of the bed. That sequence is great with the guy with the maggots. I loved that whole sequence. I thought it was really genuinely scary. I do like the idea of the Super Saiyan Cenobite, but I hate giving Pinhead a backstory. I really
And
don't like
and
that.
I have a note somewhere that the Cenobites are too forgiving and helpful in this film, which I really think is just
Yeah,
against what they should be.
yeah, yeah. I totally give you that. Totally give you that.
Yeah, and also this film I think really misses. I don't know why Barker wasn't involved in so much in the second one, because from what I understood, he wanted originally to make movies from these books. So I don't know why he took a step back. I think he was also still a producer. Gave the story, but
What?
then didn't direct and write it, and it really misses his touch, at least with the
So
dialogue.
are there other books?
I think there might be. I think there's a whole series, but I
I'd
think
be
that
interested to read them then.
yeah, but I think that the rest of the films go very far from
Yeah,
where it
yeah.
started.
Oh,
Very different
I
direction.
I can imagine. Yeah. No, I'd rather read Clive Barker's vision of the way the franchise should have went.
Yeah. And what else have we got? I got a few more notes. So you mentioned in the previous film you really like the music, the soundtrack.
Yes.
This film has a slightly different soundtrack. And you know what it reminded me of? Stranger Things, actually. Some of the music is so like Stranger
Uh,
Things. I think it was a big influence on that. I didn't actually
I'm
really
s-
think about it until
still yet to watch it, man.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah,
And it's this whole thing in this place called the Upside Down, and I'm wondering if they
yeah.
took some influence from, I guess it's hell in this world where the
I mean,
cenobites live.
it makes sense. I mean, this is definitely not the only franchise of movies that talk about, or TV shows even, that do like opening up gateways to hell. It's been done since, and it was done before. You know, but I suppose this is probably the one that's uh, like Stranger Things is probably the most popular one of a modern example, and Hellraiser would be a more classic example of it.
Hmm.
Garth Marenghi's Dark Place.
Oh yeah, need to find that again and watch it.
So good.
And
Did you
also,
find any information about that actor?
I did actually, yeah. So his name is Andrew Robinson. He looks like now he's like 81. He looks so much like that actor from England who I forgot his name, who was in. He was. Do you remember in? Oh, this is a long shot here. Did you used to watch Only Fools and Horses?
Yeah.
Do you remember the dodgy police officer that was in a few episodes?
Dodgy police officer.
He's
Oh.
played by a very well-known actor. Jim Broadbent. This guy looks
Yeah,
like
Jim
this.
Broadbent. Yeah.
Yeah, Andrew Robinson, at least in the picture on Wikipedia, looks a lot like Jim Broadbent, actually. But he's been in lots of like random stuff. His first film is actually 1971, Dirty Harry. He plays the bad guy. He plays the serial killer.
Yes, yes, that's where I recognize him from. He's Scorpio.
Yeah,
Oh, fuck, yes. Oh, that's just like it's just clicked in my head. It's been bugging me. Where do I know him from? Yes, Dirty Harry. Oh,
yeah.
that's so good, and he's great in that actually.
Yeah, I really liked him when he was like kind of screaming and a bit. I don't know. There was one point where Dirty Harry almost gets him, and he's like panicking for his life, and I really liked that.
Yeah.
That level to him. He's also, by the way, so it says on Wikipedia he's usually typecast as psycho characters. Um, and he was also in Child's Play 3, apparently in 1991. But
Oh, who's he in Child's Play 3?
he's like a sergeant or some police officer or something.
Oh yes, yeah. Because Child's Play 3 is at a military school.
Ah, yeah. Apart from that, he's been in like a lot of TV stuff. He was in the A Team. He was in Law and Order, Star Trek, Deep Space Nine. Um, but yeah, it doesn't really look like he went anywhere like massive after
Hmm.
his stint in Hellraiser, really. But he's still well
Fair
known.
enough.
He's still well known.
How many Rubik's Cube squares out of 54 do you give this one? Bearing in mind, we gave the first one 47.
I'm gonna give it about hmm. I'm gonna give it about 30.
Oh, I was just going to say the same. Yeah, I'll give it 30 as well.
Yeah, it's about midway. I mean, it's a mid ranking level film. Like
Hmm.
it, in my, I'm gonna say as well for IMBD, I'm putting it about a 6, maybe.
Yeah, I'd give it a 6 as well for IMDb. 6, 6.5 maybe.
Six
I'll,
point
I'll go.
five feels high for me, but 6 at
I-
least. Yeah,
I'll go 6.5 because I am more generous than you.
yeah. Do you want to know what the real rating is? Because I had it up a second ago, but I think I lost
So
the tab.
you said the first one was 6.9. So I'm going to hazard a guess that this one is like 6.2,
Let's see.
maybe even a 6.
So yeah, Hellraiser 1987 was 6.9.
Hmm.
Hellbound is 6.4.
6.4. Not a huge drop off.
No, not really, actually. But
Hmm.
still, I don't put them in the same ballpark, really.
No, not at all. Not at all. It's more, it's less about this one's rating. It's more about the first one being so underrated on IMDb.
Criminally.
Hmm. Very much so. All right then. Well, thanks for coming out to listen to us, everyone. We are Film Shrapnel, and this has been Hellraiser 1 and 2, a double feature that has been a bit of a mountain to climb, but we've gotten there. Craig, I've enjoyed it.
I've really liked this one. Yeah.
Really fun. Even the second one, I've enjoyed watching it. Good laugh
Yeah.
I've had with this. Do come and follow us on Twitter, or the app formerly known as Twitter, at Film Shrapnel, capital F, capital S. And Craig, do you want to say anything to the lovely listeners?
Yeah, just keep listening to us. We love putting this stuff out. If you guys like it, it makes us happy to see people listening. Next week
indeed.
we have Audition, our final film for Horror Month, on Halloween. So
Yeah, well,
stay tuned for that.
Yeah, that's your homework, guys, for next week. If you haven't seen Audition,
Oh yeah, watch if you can watch it before we put it out, and then you're gonna have so much more context.
Oh, yeah.
And then we're doing for November. I think I mentioned this probably in the previous pod. Shit movie month.
Shit movie month, yeah.
Still deciding the lineup, but it's gonna be good. It's gonna be fun. I'm gonna get so pissed off, but I'm gonna enjoy it. I think as well.
Well, this is it, guys. You know, if you follow us on the app formerly known as Twitter, you will get all of these announced before they get uploaded. And that way you really can follow along with us and make sure that you've watched the film before you listen to us.
Yeah, 100%.
All right. Until next time, guys, enjoy your lobotomy. Bye.
Bye.
Shrapnel.